Welcome, REDX community, friends, family, followers, power prospectors, and new agents. I'm Justin Zimmerman, the Director of Content here at the REDX, with another daily episode of the Stability and Opportunity podcast with an exceptional guest, a friend, a longtime ally of REDX and the prospecting and real estate community. Keeping Current Matters own David Childers. He's going to be covering today some really important aspects of what to expect in today's market, the impact the coronavirus is going to have on things that you might be thinking, like, will there be a rise in pre-foreclosures, the impact on home sales and prices, and all the questions very commonly asked. If you don't know who KCM is, Keeping Current Matters, they are one of the leading authorities on all the aspects of the numbers, the economic boiling down of what matters to agents today. And they do a really great job of making it easy to understand and easy to communicate. And so we've got them on today to get their perspective on what you should know about this market. And so just a couple of quick housekeeping points right now is that if you are a customer and have recently signed up, make sure that you've attended today's webinar or registered for the upcoming orientation webinar, because all the things that we talk about on these shows really tie back to you being able to use our product in a way to get the most out of it. The other thing is that if you aren't yet on the list for receiving these updates, make sure you go to theredx.com/blog to get on the list, to get updates for every episode, because behind the scenes, we have a team of writers and editors who are going to be making the scripts available to you, the images, the slides, the action points. And so if you're on that list, when we get those ready and delivered, you'll be able to get those. And so if you're waiting for them, just be patient a little bit longer. We're still working and cranking them out. And so let me jump to Dave right now and just welcome him to the show. Dave, thanks so much for making time today to spend with us.
Well, thank you for having me on, and thank you for the time you dedicate to do this and help get the message out there. No matter what, we're all living in, a kind of a crazy time right now, and so I'm grateful to be on. Grateful for our partnership with REDX and our friendship, and so thanks for having me.
Yeah, we all work together pretty well. We have some similar things that we're both trying to accomplish for the sake of the agents in our community, and there's, I think, a lot of people who know KCM, but they don't know you. And I want to make sure before we get started that they understand who they're about to hear from, what aspects of your life and professional career makes you qualified to talk to us right now about these things. And so if you could spend a couple of minutes giving us a little bit about who you are and the authority you bring to today's conversation.
I appreciate that question. My role at Keeping Current Matters is I work with our content team and our research team in gathering all the insights that I'll share today. And really those insights are what's happening in the market and how can we, as agents, as professionals in the market, make sense of this to ultimately communicate that to our clients. So just a little bit about my background. I've spent 20 years in our business, in the real estate business, from the finance angle to working with agents to the title side of it. And I look at today and what we're experiencing. It's the third crisis that I've lived through, with 9/11 in 2008, and now this coronavirus, and a lot in the middle there. And going back to 2008, it's when Keeping Current Matters was formed. And Justin, Steve Harney, the founder of KCM, we call Keeping Current Matters KCM. And at that time, Steve and I met at the formation, and he was out speaking to agents all over the country, and had just sold a 550 agent company, was a former top producer, and just wanted to help. And if you remember back in 2008, there were a lot of questions that people had, and there weren't a lot of good answers at that time of what was going to happen. And out of that crisis, Keeping Current Matters was birthed. And over the last 12 years, we've grown to 25 of what we call the KCM crew that support what we do now, which is bringing insights to agents every day. Probably the most widely read blog in our industry, the KCM blog is at the cornerstone of that.
Mm-hmm.
But every day we're looking at our industry. We're then developing insights that we're publishing as blog posts, as things that agents can share written to the consumer, so that they can be a voice of reason in this market and a voice of calm out there.
Speaking of voice of calm, I can close my eyes and I can hear you speak. And like the way you even speak has an element of calm, which probably speaks to the content you guys produce. And one thing I'd like to highlight for the audience right now is if they've missed some of the episodes prior to this one, that a lot of the recurring themes that pop up from those agents, from those coaches who have shown and explained what they've done are tools that allow them to be experts during this time to then give that voice of calm to their customers through social, through the telephone. And so I thought this was a fantastic opportunity to not just talk about what the tools are, but to bring somebody in who's developed the tools and is working with those agents firsthand to give them an insight into, well, like I get on the phone and what do I say?
Right.
What do I send? What do I do? And so one of the main objectives of podcast series is to help agents understand what to say and what to do during these times. And I'm really excited to get into some of those details. Now, I know you've got some very common questions that you've received from the tens of thousands and probably even more of real estate agents who visit your blog and you guys interact on a day-to-day basis. And so instead of us trying to invent them, I'm really glad that you've helped bring them to today's show. And so if we could first start right there, why don't we go with that first question that seems to be one of the most frequently asked questions, which I have right here at the top of my list, which is, what is the effect the coronavirus is going to have on the economy? And is there possibly a recession built into this? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting right now, and thinking about that. I think the world in general, we're looking at doing a lot of things differently, and they're probably going forward. A lot of things we'll do differently, but in our business, the last couple of years, we've been told to do videos, shoot things, put things out there on social media. Now we're being forced to. We're being forced to do things on Zoom or interactions like that. So I think some of those things are going to stick around, and some of those things are pushing us to be able to do that. I think one thing that we always talk about at KCM is being able to deliver knowledge. We're able today to deliver knowledge despite the fact we may need to remain in our homes, or we may need to be in a place where we can't do that physically. And I think you're going to see a lot more of that going forward. And a lot of agents are being pushed into that, where they're like, I don't know if I want to, I don't feel comfortable on video, or I don't feel comfortable this way. And now you don't have an option. And I think that's going to be good for a lot of people.
That's great. I'm not sure if you caught the question I was setting up before we lost connection, but I'd love to jump back into it, which is one of the most common ones you guys are getting right now is the effect coronavirus will have on the economy, and I would say pressure it's putting on possibly having a recession.
Sure. Yeah. So let's talk about that, because our team, like I mentioned before, is developing insights each day to help bring. A lot of times, what we want to do is bring visuals to that. But if I were to have to make an analogy right now about an economic slowdown and going into a recession, the technical definition of a recession is 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP. But the real, definition of a recession is a slowdown in the economy, an economic slowdown. And what we all know by what's happening out in the world, our economy is slowing down. And so we'll talk about that in GDP, but what that brings up to a lot of people is 2008, Justin. And they think, okay, here we go again. And if I were to make an analogy there, 2008 was like a tornado came through our town and ripped up, homes and buildings, and ripped up power lines and destroyed things that had to be rebuilt. And when I think about today is, you're in Salt Lake, and, the equivalent of today is we have a snowstorm that's come into town. and it's shut everything down. It's 6 feet of snow on the ground. But what we know is, even economically speaking, that snow will melt. The snow will let up and it will melt, and the roads will then be plowed. We'll be able to get back out. And so, some of the things that I want to kind of talk about today, I think will show you that in a little bit more of a picture. So let me share my screen here. And all right. Okay, you should see there a slide showing a V recovery. So what we're seeing in the economy right now would be the equivalent of, you would take a tennis ball and throw it at the ground as hard as you could. It hits the ground and shoots back up. We've listed here 4 entities, 4 financial institutions that see a dip in the economy here in the first quarter, and that black line represents even. Below it would be negative, above it would be growing and positive. And most of them are saying, hey, we're wrapping up here quarter one, the first day of quarter two as we're on this call, and we're going to see a decline in business in quarter one. That makes a lot of sense. But what the headline is going to show you is we're going to see a sharp decline in quarter two. We saw massive unemployment last week, and we're going to see unemployment this week. And a lot of people are being affected by this economy. But what we also know is in the second half of the year, based on how we started the year, and let's talk about our business. The way we started this year, the biggest challenge that we had as an industry is inventory. We didn't have enough homes for sale for the number of people that wanted to buy those homes. But what we saw in January and February were record year-over-year existing home sales, and a lot of that reporting is coming out, but it's dramatically changing. And so this pause in the economy and tailing out here in quarter one and certainly in quarter two, it's going to be a bumpy ride. And these projections, I fully anticipate them to be revised and to be rethought through. Once we get through this, we expect it to be a more of a V-shaped recession and economic slowdown at that. And I brought a quote in here that I want to read real quick. It's from John Burns Consulting. And John Burns Consulting, if you don't know them, is a consulting organization that works with a lot of home builders, a lot of hedge funds, a lot of the people that are participating in real estate out there across the country. And they say historical analysis showed us that pandemics are usually V-shaped, sharp recessions that recover quickly enough to provide little damage to home prices. And some very cutting-edge search engine analysis by our information management team showed the current slowdown is playing out similarly thus far. And so when you think about that, you go back to the slide we looked at before, we see this slowdown coming, but we also see that in the projections of this rebound. Another thing I would bring to this conversation as we talk about it is a survey recently by PricewaterhouseCoopers that asked 50 leaders from a cross-section of industries, if this health crisis were to end today, how long would it take for you to get back up to business? And 2 out of 3 of those folks said within 30 days. And the other 24% said within 90 days. So really seeing that and understanding from people that are out running businesses, not to say there aren't businesses that are going to be severely impacted by this. Most say, hey, once we get through this, we'll be back to business as usual pretty quickly. So I think we see things there that, stop sharing here for a minute, that really point to this being a pause in the economy, where last time we saw the economy, that housing was at the epicenter. We can't forget that. Right now, what's causing this is an external health crisis. Be very different from 2008.
What came to mind for me is that agents are looking for hope, and yes, there could be and likely will be revisions to recovery projections and formulas that drive them. But the point that one of our previous guests made, which I thought was really, really important, David Knox, it just stands out to me, is I asked them this question, which sets up what you've just shown, is that if an agent plans to be in real estate and believes in real estate, then you're going to do things between now and whenever that recovery happens. And so he basically said, if you want to be around when this changes, this is what you've got to do. And so I think there's a growing number of agents who are starting to understand, oh, wait, this is not a vacation. This is not time off. And then I think there's another section of agents who are unsure and they're doing nothing. And I feel like just providing any glimpse, whether it's Q3 or Q4 or into the beginning of next year, there's going to be a melting of the snow. And there are things that agents should be doing now to help set themselves up for then.
Absolutely. I think what you're seeing right now is you will see careers that will be made by people. People will step up and do that. And I would point to one thing that I would draw out in this, and I don't make this as a political statement, but if you look at the tragedy of this situation in the state of New York right now, it's unreal. And KCM was actually formed on Long Island, and we've got a lot of friends and folks that are being affected in New York. And we're talking today about the economic impact, not the health impact, because that's the one thing we can control. But look at the political stock of Andrew Cuomo in this, a tragedy in his state. And now he's being talked about as someone who could potentially run for president. Now, I don't want to get involved in that, but this crisis has elevated his political stock, not because he knows what's going to happen tomorrow, but because he looks at today and he says, this is what I've got for today, and here's what we're going to do. And I think in our business today, it's the difference between perfect advice and the best advice we have available. No one can give perfect advice, but we can give the best advice available to us based on what we're seeing. And we know right now that's going to vary from locality to locality. Some areas are going to be impacted more than others. Economies, different businesses are going to be impacted more, but the agents that step up and deliver that advice, I believe some careers and some impact in families, which is what we're really talking about here, that's going to be made in this time.
That's a great point. I'd like to play with that a little bit more, because I'm not sure, and this is one of the points that keeps showing up over and over and over again. Repetition is the mother of skill, and so we're going to keep saying it until people start to get it more and more if they haven't gotten it already. But that's a great example, is leadership. Right now is a time for leadership. And I had a great quote I was going to read in the beginning that I've been repeating to myself for quite a while now. And it means a lot to me personally, but I feel like now more than ever, it plays into the theme we're talking about here, is that the circumstances don't make a man or woman, but they reveal that man or woman. And that if we are responding to fear right now in a way that has us hiding, it's just revealing to us what we are and gives us a glimpse at who we might actually want to be. And I don't think it matters whether you're in a position of government or elected officer, right, of a state or jurisdiction, or that you've elected yourself. And I feel like that's where the power can come from, is real estate is about being elected by the neighborhoods around you, choosing you to be the person who helps sell these homes. And so people don't vote with their ballots in this case, but they will vote with their attention and dollars. And that if agents aren't realizing that this is their chance to become the leaders in the market, to do things as our guest yesterday, Cleve Gaddis, talked about, is that service before results. And in his case, he actually changed his message from service to service regardless of results, because the timelines aren't exactly clear. That, I mean, he's hustling, he's busy. Yeah. He's not completely fearless. He's got some fear, but he's using that to get out there and to become the leader in his market. And I really wanted to I think we could spend more time on this, because I think regardless of the stats that we talk about and the numbers and those questions, I feel like until the mindset of the agents watching this get that this is their chance to step up into a position in place that has never been available in this way before, that leadership is now the thing that's going to drive their business forward, with your stats, right, with the tools, with things like REDX, that in the weeks and months coming ahead, I want them to be able to look back and say, wow, I heard something that clicked for me and I transformed my life and business from that day forward. I feel like that's that's the central point of the opportunity we have right now with the people who are watching this and are going to watch this.
Yeah, I think Justin, one thing you and I have talked about a lot in our partnership with KCM and REDX is really that relationship of who are you going to talk to and what are you going to say? And I think in today's market right now, agents that have for the last number of years, however long you've been in this business, branding yourself as the trusted expert, as the authority, as all the things that we talk about in our business, now is the time to deliver on that. It's interesting. In the last 7 days, I've seen 2 cases where, and I'm sure there've been a lot more, but where KCM members have been asked by their local news station to come on and talk about what is happening in the market. Here's the interesting thing. One was a KCM member for 10 years and one had been a KCM member for about 5 days. And so I'm certainly not saying everybody that uses KCM is going to be interviewed by their local news station, but this has the ability to be the great equalizer among people that if you think I haven't been in the business long enough, or I've been doing this, you have a chance to get out in the market with a message for your market about this is what's happening. This is what we're seeing happen in the real estate market. And to your point, be that message of hope for people out there that are looking for answers. In times of uncertainty, people follow the certain, and that's what you'll see play out.
Okay, so you just dropped something that I really want to jump into. I know we're kind of getting off some of the questions here, but tactics, right? What do I say and what do I do? And so if you're an agent who's on the telephone and you're prospecting expireds, FSBOs, GeoLeads, whatever lead type, which is some of the predominant ways that our customers derive value from their behaviors and actions with our tools, right? Or let's spin it another way, right? With KCM, how do KCM members, right, derive value from the things that they lean on from you guys? Actually, there's a way that they use ours and yours together, but that's another conversation down the road today. Let's talk about the tactics right now, because those agents who got on the news, and I don't think it's coincidental, I think there are some characteristics that we boil down, some things that they said and some things that they did to help put them in the position to where they're being recognized as the expert in their market. One person's been in it for 10 years. One person's been in it for 5 days. I'm sure there are people listening to this right now who've been in the business for 5 years and for 5 days, or 10 years and 5 days. I'm sure you spent a little time learning about that. Could you share, as best as you can, kind of a step-by-step approach from what you've learned that agents watching this right now, what could they do with KCM to position themselves with what you guys are producing to receive that type of exposure?
Yeah. Okay. So this is, it is going off track on that, but it's a very, very good point, Justin. I'm glad you brought it up. And I want to talk about this high level, and then you coach me how practical you want me to take it into, because I can take it into an example.
Okay.
In order to be able to do this, you have to answer the questions that clients are asking. In order to be able to answer the questions clients are asking, you have to first know what the questions are. And I'm not sitting here on this call pretending that I know every one of the questions. I can tell you what we hear at KCM, what the questions are, and I can show you how I would coach you to answer that. But you may have questions in your market. You go, hey, my clients are wondering about this. My clients are saying, hey, there's a lot of people that are getting laid off and are losing their jobs, or we're about to see a wave of foreclosures. I'm saying clients are asking, hey, is this 2008 all over again? And so I think if you know those questions and then you know those answers, and listen, right now is the time to become a student of our business. And when you become a student of our business, you can develop what I would call a relevant market opinion. There are plenty of people in our business that have opinions, and I talk to a lot of them. But using facts in this market to develop your relevant market opinion, and being able to deliver that to answer questions dramatically sets you apart. And you can certainly, I can give you a relevant market opinion and answer to a question. You can say, David, I don't agree with that. I have a different opinion of that. And my response would be, great, show me the research and the homework you've done to develop that opinion. Most times it's, well, I feel differently. Okay. So using a very formalized process there. And at KCM, listen, I think that's how people should do business. You don't have to use KCM to do that. Let me be clear about that. We think we have one of the best options for that. But if you're going out there and doing that on your own, that's what we believe in more than anything else.
Yeah. So I love that, because every single expert and professional that comes on here, it always dials back to not the tactics, not the tools, but the mindset. Who do you believe you are, and who do you want to become? And then that gap is like the growth towards the goal, and that tools such as KCM or REDX or any other service, right, helps you achieve that progression. I really loved what you said about that. So first and foremost, for agents watching this, that the mindset is, and I loved it, become someone who can deliver a relevant market opinion. That sounds like a really like professionally designed, physical, almost tangible concept that when people hear that, that stood out for me as something that if agents wanted to put some scripts into place, I would borrow that language and use it to make it sound like it's something that is both a accreditation. I don't want to go as far as to say that is an accreditation, because obviously that's an official thing, but it gives you it gives you authority when you say that. I still want to tie it back to how do we take what you've just said and now dial it into tactics. That's part of the fun of these episodes, is because the game plan's being invented every single day a little bit differently. We get to be a little free form and say, okay, well, let's copy hack this, right? Let's growth hack this. Let's script hack this. Let's, system hack this into something that's workable. And so I can't promise the audience everything we're about to say is going to work, but at least we're going to come up with some ideas that, based on what we're saying and what we've seen, can be something that others can go implement. And if you take it and go and use it, please come back and let us know if it worked, because we'd love to have you on the show and share it. And so first, mindset. Second, tools, tactics. So I'm a marketer. I understand one of the most important things that you just said, which is, what are the questions and pain points and concerns that your audience, in our case, I'm trying to do this for REDX and our agents and our customers and our audience. But in the case of our customers, the clients out there, what are their pain points? What are their needs? And one of the ways that we deliver, one of the ways that we capture that information, right? How do I know what my customers' pain points are, right? And so I'd like to give them some ways to collect that information, kind of the way we do it, so that way we can then come back to them with things that position us in a way that helps us establish value with them and for us. And it's not going to be any surprise, but getting on the phone, and as we've heard in so many other episodes, it's dial your sphere. Because right now, if you're in a locked down state of emergency state, you're not allowed to do cold calls, but you can contact past customers, you can call your friends, and you can then get the questions and the needs out from them. I'm sure that if someone were to just do that alone, they would then be able to come to KCM, at least look at the stuff that's on your blog, and for free, they immediately get questions answered that they can then go back to their audiences with.
Absolutely. So you mentioned the KCM blog. Anybody can sign up for that, and I say this is the most read blog in the real estate business, because I just don't know another one that's read by that many and shared by that many agents. But you don't have to be a KCM member to do that. We also made a decision 2 weeks ago to help as many people in our industry as we could. And I'll tell you this: we developed a site that's keepingcurrentmatters.com/coronavirus. Now, the interesting thing, I didn't know we were going to talk about this, but I'll kind of give you this. that site is organized by what are the questions that people are asking, and then what are the visuals, and how do you answer that question?
So
And
good.
listen, there's more information there. You could spend a lot of time researching it and understanding it. But that's my point: is become a student, become well versed. I love your perspective there, Justin, on, hey, scripting to me and being in our business is knowing what you're going to say before you say it, not being boxed or canned, but being confident. And this is how I understand the market. I'm going to give you the best advice I can for your situation. And I'm going to deliver that to, regardless if you choose to use me or not. One of those type of scripts, like being able to deliver that is what people need today.
I wanted to paint another picture because we talked about getting on the news. And so I first wanted to cover agents thinking of themselves as marketers right now in a positive way. A marketer's primary job is to understand the needs of their customers and their audiences and create things and say them in a way that are valuable enough to want them to engage and build a relationship in which they can know, like, and trust and eventually do business with them. So with that said, you could have one audience, and I think typically agents see expired homeowners, for sale by owners, just listed, just sold, kind of the common things that agents come to us for, and we encourage them to use. And that's their primary audience. And they say this to them, like you said, with a confidence of knowing how to respond, and that's the scripting. But let's talk about the news. I would say agents could be that candidate, that mayor, that self-elected officer of the local news environment by rehearsing the stuff that's on that /coronavirus site. I'll say it again, keepingcurrentmatters.com/coronavirus. I think we'll put that into the chat right now. I'm sure the team's already on it behind the scenes. So probably, they're giving me a thumbs up. So if you're watching this live, you can click on that right now. But let's think about getting on the news. Just right now, the local news covers all the big headlines, but it seems like they might be thirsty for something else. And if I was a real estate agent and I wanted to get on the news, what would I do? I would probably go to the site and look at all the reporters' names, find their Twitter handles, because they all have Twitter handles, or Instagram. Sometimes you can even call the news desk and find what the breaking news number is. And I would put together some of the things that you just said about putting together relevant market opinions. And if the reporters want to know what's really happening in the neighborhoods and how homeowners are really going to need to know what to expect, I think that might be the angle. I would write up some copy. I would send some tweets, and I would probably take some screenshots off your site and include them in there and let them know that if they'd like to talk more, create a conversation. I think it was one of our past guests, Jason Morris, who said, and this is great adaptation of Jason Morris's resources he gave agents, is don't give it all away at once, right? Don't give them the answers. Say, hey, here's just enough. Let's talk more if you want to hear my, and I'll use my relevant market opinion on what's going to happen in our state or our county or a zip code or whatever relevant is to the news's geo area. And I would just put those out, and I would maybe create a video if I added it to it, talking about it. Would follow up, and I would follow up the same way we would follow up with anything, and put a little campaign together where I'm just feeding the news kind of those open-ended questions until someone contacted me. And I wouldn't expect someone to get back to me on the first time. Like I wouldn't expect a homeowner to call me in for an appointment on the first time, but I would continue to be a source of news to the news until someone called me.
Yeah, I think that idea, and look, I want to be clear. I have a recipe for how to get on the news, but I think doing that is the right thing. You know what I mean? If you're out there each day, and I'll tell you the primary question that's on a lot of people's minds right now is this 2008 all over again? We talked about that because there are a lot of memories that we all have as consumers and people that lived through that. But certainly with regard to housing, people are in a position where they're like, here we go again.
Yeah.
Here we go. We're going to see high unemployment. When people are unemployed, they can't make home payments. We're about to see a wave of foreclosures. And there are some things the federal government and banks are doing about that, and I could talk about that. But I think being able to deliver some of those things confidently to our market is what we need to be doing right now.
All right, I'm going to take one more stab at this before moving on, because you just gave me the next marketing copy unlock for what I would say to a news reporter, or what I would say online if I had a social media following of homeowners, or if I got on the phone with our GeoLeads tool and were to leave voicemail messages for concerned homeowners. Is I would say something like this: is like, "Hi, my name's Justin Zimmerman. I'm a local real estate agent at ABC in Palm Beach County, Florida, and I've been studying the market for the last 10 years or 5 years with, this level of understanding. And so these are some of the common questions that I'm uncovering. If you'd like to know the answers to them, I'd love to help give you them, and then take your commonly asked questions. So that way it creates that open loop. Like, is this 2008 all over again? What things, if you're concerned about the following questions too, hit me up, DM me back, call me, whatever mediums called for, and then let's have a conversation about it so I can give you clear advice and give you my relevant market opinion. And I would put that out, and I would use that, maybe drop a slide or two from your guy's site, and just kind of keep dripping that frequently enough to where it's not like the only thing I'm posting, but frequently enough to where eventually you will get a call back. And that's also based off of Jason Moore's formula too.
Yeah, I think being out in the market with things that tell the story of this market, just like you said, we've seen so much. One of the things that I love about what we get to do, and I see you posting a lot on it too, Justin, is watching the uniqueness to which people in the market are out there delivering a message. I've seen everything from somebody recording a screen capture of an article that they read, communicating a point, to people making their own videos, to phone calls and scripting and things like that. It never ceases to amaze me, the creativity that goes into delivering this is what's happening, and doing that consistently is what we know. Strong, clear messaging wins today. Wins always, but for sure today.
I know he didn't say it. Maybe he did, and he adapted it. And I'm not dropping Ronald Reagan in because I have any sort of like political nudgery that I would use in the situation. It just, he happens to be the source of the quote. Donald Miller, who's the author of Story Brand, quotes Ronald Reagan, and then I would say paraphrases it, is that if you confuse, you lose. Yeah. If you confuse, you lose. And so I feel like now's the time to get clear, to keep current with what matters. You like how I did that?
Love it. Because current matters.
Current matters. Let's get back a little bit on track with some of the things that you had prescribed for us today. Sure. Let's jump into probably one of the biggest questions. If you turn on the news, stock market's down, stock market's down, stock market's, and some ups, but mostly downs.
Sure.
And so can you maybe help us understand how the stock market might impact the housing market?
Yeah, sure. I think what we're seeing right now, I'm going to answer this in a couple of different ways. Over the last few weeks, we've seen extreme volatility up, down. We don't know where this all settles out to. We've seen the Federal Reserve coming in with, if credit markets were iced up and they were in a block of ice, they'd come in with a blowtorch and to thaw these markets. Now, there's a lot of talk, certainly on the mortgage side of our business, about the impact that is having on buying mortgage-backed securities. I'll tell you this: our research team is on top of that, and we're delivering that commentary as we have it. But certainly is an unfolding situation. But a couple things I would say right now is what we have to remember is our business was the epicenter of the downturn in 2008, and it is not that today. The cause of this downturn is an external health crisis. We have been in a healthy economy coming into a growing economy coming into this, and to expect that to help us on the other side But let me show you a couple of slides really quick that'll help articulate that for you real quick. So I'm sharing my screen here, and this is a representation of the housing and mortgage crash in 2008. And what you can see here is you see a stock market correction in that time of about 51%. Also during that time, you see home price depreciation through 2007, 8, and 9 to the tune of just under 20%. We all remember that. But when we start to look at 2008, we see a situation that isn't as much like that as it is 9/11. And I pulled a quote for us today from economist Dave Rosenberg. And what he said is what 9/11 has in common with what is happening today is that this shock has also generated fear, angst, and anxiety among the general public, and people avoided crowds then as they believed another terrorist attack was coming and are acting the same way today to avoid getting sick. The same parts of our economy are under pressure: airlines, leisure, hospitality, restaurants, and entertainment, consumer discretionary services in general. So what do we know? We know that today people aren't going out. We've got lockdowns and shelter-in-place orders across the country in different places, and that varies from town to town. But people are avoiding public places out of the fear of becoming sick, and certainly we need to listen to the advice there and do what we need to do. But when we start to do that same comparison of the dot-com crash and 9/11 crash, we see a different picture. And we see then an S&P correction of about 45%, so volatility and loss in the market, but we actually see home price appreciation during that time, and you can see that there on the screen. So to go back to that question, we start to see volatility in the stock market looking much more like 9/11 than 2008, and expect the market would react and respond in a way more similarly to that as we.
It's great. I'm sure that's what makes you guys, I would say, famous for your charts and graphs. Like I said in the beginning, you guys do a fantastic job of taking complex concepts and boiling them down into not black and white, I guess in this case, red and blue.
Sure. I mean, there's the old saying that a picture is worth 1,000 words. And there's even some things that have been trending, today on social media, videos worth, 1,000 handshakes or something like that. But I think being able to put things out in the market or show people, like you said, making a phone call and then saying, hey, I found an article or I found something that you might be interested in. We've got articles and things like that you can share. You don't have to be a KCM member, and send that to somebody and say, hey, I know this is something we talked about. Here's a great explanation of that in the market to help you in communicating to that customer about what is happening in the market.
So let's do a quick summary in kind of just regular words around stock market impact on housing. Correlation, usually no, unless the epicenter of the problem is the housing market itself.
Absolutely. Can I hop in here and show one other slide, because it'll really answer that question. So what I'm sharing here is prior recessions in this country and its correlation to home prices. So what our research team did was went back and looked at the 5 past recessions in this country and what happened to home prices. So what you can see is in 3 of those 5, home prices actually appreciated. One time in 1991, we saw marginal depreciation, but what everybody remembers is 2008 when we saw massive depreciation. So if we want to know what that looks like, we can go back in history and look at times there have been recession. Again, definition of a recession is an economic slowdown. When we saw that happen, what happened to housing, and be informed in getting that message out. So yes, we can actually we can look at that and draw correlations there.
I think one of the biggest takeaways from our session today is going to be some of the remaining slides and any additional slides that you want to show for everybody watching. We've got a team of note takers behind the scenes, and every time we have an episode, we meet afterwards. We talk about what we think is going to be the most important thing to share with the audience who missed the live presentation. And I think that, of course, KCM, what you guys are best known for, is we're going to probably chop up some of these scenes into one scene. And so I'd love to jump into a couple of more slides that if they stand out for you, I don't want our audience to miss them. And so if you want to bring those up, or if you'd like me to move on to some of the next, I guess we have 2 more questions here that would speak to them. Should we jump into the next questions, or are there some additional slides you want to cover?
So I'll tell you, let's go with I'll go through the kind of the question of, is this 2008 all over again, in comparing the markets? Because I have some other slides there. You have all these slides, Justin. I want your team to feel fully empowered to get those out to whoever's on the call, whoever wants those, so that they can use them however they want. Because again, we want to help as many people, and through our partnership with REDX, we want folks to have that. But one of the central questions that's being asked right now is, again, is this 2008 all over again? So I want to show you 4 graphs real quick, and I'll burn through these pretty fast for the sake of time, that you can use out there in the market for, a post, a conversation, something that you're doing. So let me bring this up real quick here. All right, so the first one that I have up here is a comparison of home price appreciation leading up to the crash of 2008 to current home price appreciation. Now, what this is what we would refer to as macro US data, average data from across the US, certainly different at price point in different local market. But
do you want to hit that, hide that little reminder that popped up? It's covering some data for us.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. The 6 years leading up to the crash, you see it on the left-hand side of the screen. Compared to the 6 years today, we see appreciation much less. In fact, the highest year leading up to today is not even equal to the lowest year leading up to 2008. And while, prices are appreciating and growing, we don't have runaway appreciation in the housing market like we did then. Big piece that you want to be able to communicate with people. The second thing that I'll show is answering this question: is it as easy to get a loan today as it was back then? We look at the Mortgage Credit Availability Index. It's a report that comes out every month from the Mortgage Bankers Association. And the way to think about this index is, the higher the index, the easier it is to get a loan. You see on the left-hand side how high the index was before the housing bubble. Mm-hmm. Everybody in our business knows there was this pendulum swing and guidelines and qualifications to obtain financing for a home loan. And where we've remained after that is nowhere near where we were prior to the crash. We often used to joke around it was hard not to get a mortgage back then. And today we know it's dramatically different. Another big difference between the market leading up to the crash and today is the number of homes for sale in this country, inventory on the market. And what we know going back is that we had just over 8 months of inventory on the market heading into the crash. And right now, we've got right at 3 months of inventory, probably a little bit less than that as folks are taking their homes off the market, given the current situation. And we started this year with the biggest challenge to our industry being available inventory to sell. And so we know a balanced market at 6 months, below that being a seller's market, above that being a buyer's market. We don't have an oversupply of homes on the market to deteriorate pricing right now. Got it. The last one I'll share, dramatically different, is the total amount of equity cashed out by Americans pre-crash and then today. And so think about these as cash out refis. The 3 years leading up to the crash, there were $824 billion as cash out refinances in this country, the 3 years leading up to today, there was $232 billion refinanced as cash out refis. And really what that speaks to, one, pre-crash, people were harvesting equity from their homes and a lot of times putting those into depreciating assets, buying jet skis, going on vacations, doing things that thinking this will never end. And I'll tell you this, consumers, by and large, this picture shows it, have decided now to treat equity very differently. And what we also know is there's more home equity in this country right now than ever before. And when you look back at 2008, when somebody has a home that's leveraged, to the hilt and it loses a little bit of value, all of a sudden you're underwater. The home is literally not worth what you owe on it.
Just some final concluding thoughts is that, again, wherever you're watching this, we want you to engage, send in your questions. If you're doing amazing things in this market, adapting them to work, and you want to be on the show, comment, like, email, follow us wherever you are. And again, your host of the show. And okay, well, I guess we're going to be bringing him back. I'm here. He's stepping back in to wrap things up with us. Okay. We're just going to wrap it up. I'll see you guys next time tomorrow at 1:30 for our next show of the Stability and Opportunity Podcast.